Buenas a todos, chavales. Otro viernes más con el Star Citizen Live, que en este caso se titula algo así como Que se haga la luz. Bueno, pues va a ir sobre la iluminación con el cabeza de arte de luces, si no recuerdo mal, y 26 segundos para que empiece.
A Pico Christmas special. Don't threaten me with a good idea. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live Gamedev. Let there be light. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, that's where we take about an hour out of our
Está comentando que si alguien no ha visto Star Citizen Live antes, pues es un programa en el que a veces pues responden preguntas, otra vez realizan un proceso. En final, lo que hacen es acercar el Star Citizen a la comunidad a través de estos shows, ¿no?
episodes, and that's what we're doing this week. Joining us on the show this week is an esteemed guest from our lighting team, Mr. Chris Campbell. Chris, how you doing?
Hey, good, thanks, Jared. How are you this morning?
Good. I'm all right. Thank you for agreeing to take the time out of of everyone's busy schedule as we're heading into the final furlough of Alpha 3.1 here.
Sure.
I know, or 3.1.1. I did
3-1 takes me back.
Yeah. Do I look like I know what year it is? It's time is 2018. We're as we're approaching 311. What are we doing today? You are of course a what is it? Lead lighting.
Yeah, I'm
Grand
the lead
Poobah?
lighting artist for the Persistent Universe.
All right. And what are we doing today?
So I just thought we would do like a quick kind of relight-ish of a surface outpost on Hurston.
Okay.
Vale, parece que lo que van a hacer es volver a reiluminar lo que sería Hearthstone y que nos va a enseñar pues eso, cómo hacen a través del proceso de esa tarea, ¿no?
Lighting and sound are two of my little pet projects with game development because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what goes into it, what makes good or effective lighting and stuff like that. So we're gonna explore some of that process today.
Yep.
If you want, you're the driver, I'm the passenger today, so you can start your screen share, and we'll just jump right into it.
Okay. Share that there. All right. So yeah, I mean, I'll try and keep some of the boring technicalities out of it and focus on kind of making something cool and just going through kind of my process of exploring a space and kind of
Dice que nos va a hablar acerca
figuring out.
de su proceso de explorar el espacio que va a evitar todo lo que es ser demasiado técnico a la hora de hablar.
Which I've put on Hurston. I've got access to the sun, time of day, so I can quickly and easily change the time of day, which is going to be useful.
Está viendo que
But of course,
puedes cambiar
everyone
el
loves a
tiempo
good
del día y la
sunset, so
noche
we can
con una herramienta
start off there, I
súper
think.
rápida y lo veis.
Does it ever make you just feel powerful, just being able to grab the sun like that and just be like,
oh, I wish I could do that in real life. Just make it sunset all day long. Right. So yeah, just to start with, this is kind of what everyone should already know from the insides of these habitation units. And so what I've done is I've done like a kind of very rough, quick redressing pass. Mostly just because without it, the lighting's very functional. It's all kind of built into the structure, and while there's a lot you can do when you're kind of building a space like this, you can kind of design the lighting to fit in nice and neatly. But since we're going to go a little bit crazy, having a bit more freedom and a little bit more places and locations where we can kind of throw lights and cast weird shadows and stuff like that. This is going to be a good starting point.
all right, so hold on, you just turned on a layer or whatever. So you started with the base model Rayari Hab, and
Exactly.
then before the stream here, you've spent some time redressing this.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Me está comentando de que lo que ha hecho es que ha puesto el modelo base y antes del stream ha gastado algún tiempo tratando de revestir esto con una serie de accesorios diferentes, como vemos aquí. Aparte de que dice de que, bueno, de que cuando tú construyes una estancia de este tipo, que puedes modificar la luz a tu antojo, incluso las sombras y demás. Bueno, a tu antojo no. Bastante, o sea, puedes modificar bastante las cosas, ¿no? Para la iluminación.
And we'll kind of kick it off from there. So that's the old lights now gone. What I will do is I'll keep all the cube maps because I think again that's kind of, I mean it's a very critical part of the job is kind of laying out cube maps for the best ambient lighting, but no one wants to watch me do that for an hour as well. So I'll use the existing cube maps.
Well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what a cube map is, though, because a cube map is incredibly important to lighting in the Lumberyard engine. So
Yes.
Just introduce us to the concept of cube maps.
Yeah, sure. So the cube map is, or the environment probe is kind of the absolute fundamental part of our lighting kind of workflow. So all without it, we've just got basically a pitch black interior. It's pitch black because it's all interior and hidden away using vis areas and stuff, which basically means that you start from absolutely zero lighting. And what an environment probe does is you kind of place a kind of like an area of effect. In this case, these are all kind of cubes and with a little bit of softness on them. And what they do is they capture what's called a cube map, which is just like a texture which is captured from like imagine that each one of these has like a little camera pointed in all 6 directions of the cube. It takes a screenshot and then reprojects that ambient light into all 4 directions. So the more that you have, theoretically, the more detail you can get in your ambient lighting.
Está comentando que esos cubos que veis ahí es el pilar básico para poder tener luz en lo que es el motor de gráfico de Lumberyard. Y comenta de que lo que puedes hacer, o sea, lo que hacen estos cubos es que si tú los quitas, vemos la habitación oscura como lo vimos antes, no habría luz para nada. Y entonces, cuantos más cubos de estos tengas, más detallada vas a tener la luz. Aparte de eso, dice que imaginemos que como si esto tuviera cámaras en las 6 direcciones y de esa manera pues recabara fotografías del entorno, de las texturas del entorno y luego reproyectara o reprodujera la luz o el ambiente que se produce en ese entorno.
Well, without them, and unfortunately, still not having any kind of ray tracing or something like that, you need ambient lighting in the game. A long time ago, you would just have kind of a consistent ambient value, which would be like some kind of gray or blue or taken from the sky color, so I don't know, some kind of orange, and that would just be projected throughout the entire world in kind of a uniform way. But cube maps allow us to kind of account for occlusion based on like the window, for example, or the ceiling or the floor, which makes things then appear darker, which gives you more depth of contrast between like the interior, which is nice and dark here, versus the exterior out there.
Okay.
Yeah. And the brighter it gets outside, I'm not sure how easily some of this will pick up on stream, but the brighter it gets on the outside, the cube maps will recapture, and then you'll get like even.
Está diciendo que no tienen ray tracing, pero los cubos esos, digamos que cuando tú proyectas imágenes, o sea, aumentas el brillo fuera, la luz fuera, pues eso a través de los cubos es capturado y reproducido en las estancias.
Mode. And I'll turn off the screen space reflections. So this is basically like all of the materials have just turned into like a glossy, kind of like a chrome mirror, for example. Mm-hmm. And this shows you what each of the cube maps kind of reflection maps are picking up. So obviously towards the windows, you're getting a lot of this exterior lighting, and that's getting reprojected in.
Claro, lo que nos está enseñando ahora es que ha puesto todos los materiales brillantes para que nos hagamos una idea de qué son lo que refleja los cubos, ¿no? Porque vemos el reflejo de fuera, de la ventana de fuera en el piso, y eso es el cubo el que lo hace, ¿no? El cubo este en cuestión.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where we'll start.
So we know like we know one of the current hotness in video cards and everything is ray tracing.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, but not everybody will have a card that's capable of doing ray tracing at
No,
any time. So,
exactly.
all
I
right.
mean, it's an extremely intensive, graphically heavy process, and I think it's still a ways out for a lot of game development, but obviously something that we want to explore at some point for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Only we
Claro, está comentando aquí algo importante, es que dice que bueno, que el ray tracing, pues no todos pueden tener una tarjeta que lleve ray tracing o algo así, pero entonces quieren tener ese efecto, en caso de que no tengamos ray tracing además, que tener ese efecto, pero el ray tracing es una cosa que definitivamente explorarán en el futuro.
probes.
In the meantime, we've got cube maps and environment probes, and that's that's good enough for like kind of 95% of cases.
Cool.
So, yeah.
All right. So I apologize for derailing you. You
No, that's totally
continue.
fine. Derail away. Okay, so
I find the topic very illuminating. I totally stole that
Right.
from chat.
Yeah, so I mean, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's probably just me, but I already really like looking at scenes where there's no lighting and it's basically just simulations of the exterior lighting kind of bouncing around in an interior. I always think that looks really cool. You get lots of nice reflections and stuff like that. So you'll have to forgive me if I might noodle around a bit and just kind of look at certain angles. But that's also
Bueno, está diciendo de que a veces se pierde en el sentido de que que esta ambientación así, de que no hay luz en el interior y recibes luz del exterior, que le gusta ese tipo de ambientación y que le perdonemos en caso de que se quede mirando algún ángulo concreto, pues al final es también parte de su proceso el investigar cómo se ve la luz de diferentes ángulos, ¿no? En plan que se queda maravillado él mismo por ese tipo de iluminación que le gusta, ¿no?
By all means, you do you.
alrighty.
You just
Then,
tell us what you're doing.
all right, I'm gonna add a light,
Y dice que va a añadir
There
una
we
luz. Ahí está.
and we're done. So that's that's lighting for you. So obviously, just adding in a light by default just gives me a nice kind of white, very boring light by itself. But obviously, you want to see what you're doing. So I mean, a lot of people may notice where some of these props come from. When I was building this dressing, I was kind of thinking it's maybe some guy who works in Lorville, and he's kind of a little bit fed up of the Hurstons, and he's maybe stolen some stuff from Lorville, and he's brought it out to his little drug stash.
Bueno, la idea de cuando la idea de cuando hizo este opus, que algunas personas podéis conocer el estilo de las cosas, ¿no? Que simplemente puede ser una persona que trabajaba en Hearthstone, para la familia Hearthstone, y que ha decidido robar algunas cosas y las tiene pues almacenadas en su casa personal, ¿no?
All right, so I'm gonna start with maybe like these props already have some light fixtures built into them. So I think what could be cool to start with is just like some little kind of dim, I don't know, lighting or information over here, just to make it a little bit less flat. I'm gonna turn this guy on. Let's start with a nice dim kind of intensity. I'm going to link the light to the picture frame, which then so each asset or material
va a
can have
vincular
a
la luz
glow assigned to it.
va a vincular la luz al frame de la pintura, con ese lo ha hecho ahí un momento.
And then let's make this a projector light, and we'll give it just a simple kind of projection.
Es una propiedad que es de
Up a little
proyección
bit,
y la mueve así para
and
abajo.
we're off to our start. So that's kind of cool. It's almost a little bit horror movie-esque, like kind of the pictures following you along the wall. Let's go with something a little bit warmer in color, maybe. But I think
cambiando la
this guy's
calidez
a
del
little bit
color.
sick, so we'll use a lot of like kind of greenish yellows and stuff like that. We'll reduce the radius because we're always thinking about performance. Let's expand it a little bit. Let's make it a little bit brighter.
You mentioned performance very casually there, but there's always got to be this ever looming shadow, this presence over everything you do, where it's you have to resist the urge to go hog wild or crazy, but at the same time, one of the tenets of Star Citizen is always pushing the envelope, as they say, as far as we can. How do you balance that?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, as you say, we're certainly not shying away from expensive lighting setups and kind of pushing the boundaries there. But at the same time, yeah, obviously we want to we want people to be able to run the game at a somewhat decent frame rate. So when we're building our lighting for environments, we always just try and keep it in the back of our mind, like some rough guidelines of how many lights we can use, how many shadow casting lights we can use, and how many lights are overlapping in the scene at any given moment. And those are just kind of
Claro,
things that we
está comentando un poco a la hora del rendimiento, ¿no? Que cuando ponen luces tienen que tener cuidado de cuál es el radio de acción que tienen, pero siempre que en Star Citizen se buscan los límites, ¿no? Siempre se busca empujar el límite, aumentar el límite para mejorar la experiencia del jugador, pero claro, también tienen que tener en cuenta los frames por segundo a los que se puede jugar si pones demasiadas luces, demasiadas sombras, ¿no? Demasiadas sombras provocadas por esas luces o demasiadas fuentes de luz en una determinada zona. Siempre tienen que trabajar con eso en mente, ¿no?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so for example, I mean, especially for demonstration purposes, we want it to look as good as possible. So I'm turning on shadows quite often, but probably I guess like 80% of the lights that we're placing generally don't cast shadows, and the basic kind of thought process there is that if it's some kind of ambient light, or it's just kind of acting as a fill for the environment, you don't always need to have shadows turned on. So like for example,
Está comentando que el 80% de las luces que tiene el juego no proyectan sombras. Dice que no necesitas que todas las luces tengan sombras, sino solo determinadas, ¿no? Como aquellas que pues quieran generar algún tipo de ambiente, ¿no?
Offline renderers use, you have to kind of fake a lot of things. So in this example, like there's no bounce light coming from this light here hitting the floor and then like shining back up. If I turn it off and on, there's no difference in this part of the frame.
Right.
So what we'll do sometimes is we'll add like a kind of a bounce light or a fill kind of light. And in this case,
Dicen que debido a que ahora mismo en esta escena no se está aplicando el ray tracing porque no tienen esa tecnología todavía aquí implementada en el motor, pues pueden hacer un poco de truco poniendo otra luz para dar ese toque que desean si la del cuadro pues no tiene esa tecnología de ray tracing que reflejaría la luz fuerte del cuarto, ¿no?
Dirty laundry on the floor. So I'll bring that down to about there. And then lighting is pretty much all about ratios. So it's all about how bright is your key light, and then how bright are the subsequent bounce and fill lights and that kind of stuff to create contrast in your scene. So right now this fill light is just way too bright. So I'd bring that way down, and even more than that, probably even more than that. And so now it's very subtle, but it just adds a little bit of that kind of greenish light kind of bouncing up into the ceiling and against these areas. And this light, because it's so subtle in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't need shadow casting, to go back to your initial point. So key lights, shadow casting; fill lights, no shadow casting.
It's always a hard balance because in an ideal situation, of course, every single light would be shadow casting, and ray tracing would be on everything, and obviously you want to push these things as far as possible, but the performance is and optimization is such an important consideration. These things.
Yes.
Dice que en una situación ideal pues todas las luces tendrían sombras y habría ray tracing por todas partes, pero al final el rendimiento es algo también importante. El rendimiento de la optimización es algo necesario.
Obviously we try and replicate the real world as much as possible, and in the real world, I'm not sure I've heard of a light source that doesn't cast shadows. That would be interesting. So that's obviously the goal, but then the realities of kind of computer graphics tends to get in the way of that sometimes. All right. So yeah, I'm basically just like kind of putting in whatever I feel is going to kind of help the scene. So one thing that I like to always try and add is a little bit of movement in the lighting. That also, it helps, especially in our engine. Like a lot of other engines use baked lighting, which then tends to be very static. And once it's baked, that's kind of how it looks. But our engine is and always has been like purely dynamic. The only thing that is baked would be kind of these cube maps, and even then we update and refresh those every now and then. So it's always nice to make the most out of that those dynamic lights by making.
Claro, está diciendo de que cuando hace este tipo de cosas, pues también que le gusta añadir algún tipo de dinamismo en la luz, ¿no? Como vemos aquí, esta luz cambiante y demás, que eso ayuda pues a afianzar la imagen, a darle más realismo, ¿no? Más credibilidad.
Are set to be runtime, so I'm not manually rebaking them. But I do sometimes I'll just select them all and then kind of hit refresh to force them to update.
Claro, también estaba comentando de que en realidad en otros motores gráficos no tienes esa clase de posibilidad, pero que el Lumberyard, de hecho, todo es dinámico e incluso pues parece ser que los cubos que no lo eran, pero que sí que los hicieron, ellos los hicieron para que sí lo fueran, ¿no? Los cubos que utilizan de luz.
From it on an artist perspective, we don't control the exposure itself directly. We control the exposure through how bright we make our lighting. And in the background, we have this kind of auto exposure system, which has like a maximum brightness range and a darkness range, and then it kind of tries to strike a balance in between. So I've got these buttons up here, which will let me kind of force the exposure to a certain, almost kind of like an f-stop, but it's an EV value, an exposure value. So like this, for example, I've got it locked to an EV of 10, which works fine, kind of outside. And then once you get inside, the darker areas start getting really, really dark, almost pitch black. And so without it, the auto exposure can kind of kick in and then lift those areas. And that's kind of how you get like kind of blown out outdoors. And then when you're outside looking in, then you'd get kind of like
Le he preguntado,
darker looking
o sea, a ver
interiors from it.
A ver si la contesta, ¿no? Le he puesto la pregunta de qué hardware llega, qué PC tiene para hacer esto.
We work with our dynamic range, but we don't actually have any individual control. Like say, if I wanted this room specifically to be a certain exposure brightness, I don't have that control, which is fine because we have so many locations in our game. Having that extra level of control just means more time tweaking it, more opportunities for bugs to appear, that kind of stuff.
I know Star Citizen and Lumberyard support HDR. How does that affect your work?
Like HDR monitors or
yeah, like HDR monitor, like high dynamic range monitors and stuff. Does that
Si soporta el HDR o cómo afecta a su trabajo.
Play a factor in how you light a scene?
Not so much actually. The HDR system is kind of like it's a back end kind of a graphics system which will I don't know the technicals, so you'd have to ask someone like Ali.
Yeah.
But basically it's all kind of behind the scenes, so it takes whatever we've lit and then it pushes things in certain directions to work for HDR.
Le dice que no afecta para nada en realidad su trabajo, no realmente, ¿no? Que es otra parte, que es una parte más técnica que de lo que él está haciendo, que no tiene nada que ver en realidad, ¿no?
One of the kind of things that Ian really likes as our environment art director is he likes lots of like.
O sea que simplemente el HDR pues es una tecnología que se aplica y ya está, y él hace la escena y bueno, pues eso luego se ve como el trabajo que él hace pues se ve empujado en determinadas direcciones según el tema del HDR, ¿no?
And like aliens and that kind of stuff, kind of 80s, 90s sci-fi.
Una vez ya realizado el trabajo, me refiero. No que él tenga que cambiar su forma de trabajar, ¿no?
You've always got very low lights. You've always got lots of like specular highlights and stuff like that. And so sometimes when I'm looking to start lighting a scene, I'll just kind of place a light and just kind of look around for, again, kind of looking for those moments where I can see like, maybe I really like how the light pings off this locker here and gives me a nice hot spot down there. And then when I find a spot where I like the light, then I'll try and find a way to motivate it either by adding a light fixture there, or something glowing, or some reason for the light to be there. Because generally we want to minimize how many lights just exist in the world but don't actually have a source.
Right. I was actually going to be my next question. We started this by start working with one of the lights that were already there in the scene, with the light that was embedded at the top of the picture frame. But
Yeah.
as you work and as you go through, my next question was, how many times do you have to go back to the environment artist or the prop artist and ask for a light here or there so that you can motivate your design decisions?
Yeah, that's usually something that we try and do as early in the process as possible. So like the environment art team will block out a location, and then we'll come in and set up our cube maps and all the kind of technical basics, and at the same time try and think about where we want our key lights to come from, and if we need to request any changes to the geometry or the layout to accompany that, then that's usually the best time to do it. Because later on, when art starts getting final, it gets a little tight to request these kinds of changes.
Right.
So I kind of like where this light is here. I'm going to give it a light fixture, and I'm just going to fly down to. I've kind of got an asset zoo under the planet of all of the lighting fixtures that we tend to use.
Debajo del planeta tiene todas las movidas de luz.
This actually exists under the planets in the Precision Universe too, guys. If you
can find it.
If sometimes if you fall through the planet at the right place, you can find our assets.
Hostia, dice que si alguna vez nos caemos al planeta, que lo podemos encontrar en el universo persistente, que realmente está ahí. What the fuck? O sea que si atravesamos el planeta estará. Madre mía.
This absolutely does not exist in the game.
No, dice que no, que está troleando. Qué cabrón el dijo Lando. Está troleando, dice que no existe en el
juego.
juego.
Did you tell people we left lights under the planet?
Qué cabrón el dijo Lando, nos quiere trolear.
Here we go, and now I've got it. Kind of just roughly rotate it. And then I'm gonna... There we go.
That's not to say sometimes there's not something left under the planet on accident. That has happened.
That does happen. Well, sometimes
that does happen
spawn completely unintentionally where they shouldn't spawn.
Yeah. That happens in almost every video game. You just find a random asset somewhere where it's not supposed to be, and it's like, oops.
Yeah, but sometimes that's part of the fun, is finding something that shouldn't be there. So yeah, I mean, one other thing, like why I'm in this kind of debug view, as a lighting artist, you're often working in extremely dark locations, and if you're trying to, it would be like in real life trying to like put a light source while you're staring directly at it and figuring out where it goes against the wall. So sometimes I just turn on this debug that just removes all lighting information and just shows me the albedo textures, and then I can see where I want to actually place my light source.
Que dice que a veces utiliza una herramienta para quitar todas las luces y realmente ver dónde quiere poner las luces, ¿no? Para quitar todo lo que es pues lo que pueda molestar, para él poder hacer una idea de dónde quiere las luces, ¿no? Por eso tiene esa herramienta, ¿no? A veces hace esa herramienta.
Right. I mean, the albedo itself is like it's like an index for how much light as a material reflects from its surface.
All right, there you go.
But the word itself, I don't know. Alrighty, so we got this guy, and again, like it's very dark back up in the corners, and you'd expect some level of bounce, I think, having this hit down here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just add a simple kind of bounce light and see where we go.
Va a buscar algún tipo de equilibrio ahí para ajustar la luz en lo que son los casilleros.
Just ends up being quite a bit of like trial and error and just figuring stuff out. The more you do it, then you kind of get a feeling for what is more likely to work than not. But there's still a lot of kind of exploration that goes into it. So there we go. So now we got like some nice kind of highlights up here, filling out the room a little bit more. Without it, it's a little bit too contrasty. Then Yeah, it's always good idea to remember to like refresh the probes, because they will. The more light you add, the more light gets picked up by the probes, and then once the probes get recalculated, the scene gets brighter, and then maybe
Está
that's too
diciendo de que a la
bright, and
hora
then
de
you
hacer
have to
estas
kind
luces
of
y ir
balance the
poniendo
lighting back
cosas,
and
tiene como que darle a recalcular la luz de los props, de los accesorios que hay ahí en los casilleros, porque cuanto más luces, cuanto más fuentes de luces pones, más luz se ve reflejada, entonces tiene que darle a recalcular para ver cómo va quedando.
As I was coming from the chat was asking if you had a percentage quotient that you aim for when doing something like this.
Sure. I mean, in terms of lights that we have on screen, our general rule of thumb is to keep it around, or not around, but under like 280 lights on screen at any given moment. And you may think that that's like a lot, and how would you ever get to that kind of number? But I mean, especially in a sci-fi game, almost all light sources are man-made light sources.
Está diciendo de que en cuántas luces pues puede tener una escena como máximo, o trata de tener una escena como máximo si tiene esa medida. Dice que sobre 200 fuentes de luz, y podemos pensar que es un poco locura que haya tantas luces, pero en realidad, especialmente en una temática de ciencia ficción, que hay fuentes de luz por todos los lados, que es algo a tener en cuenta para que no se sobrecargue demasiado, siempre tenerlo por debajo de 200.
A warmer color instead. If I was coming in here, I'd want my 3 identical jumpsuits to be the main focus here. So I'll just angle it a little bit more towards on the suits themselves.
And when you said 180 lights, it was 180, right? That's what you said?
280.
280. So when you said 280 lights, that's on screen at any one time. So that's not even like
208.
in a scene. It's just wherever
No,
a
exactly. That's
person
just
can look.
In this camera
at a
frame.
time.
So like
Yeah.
there could be another 280 lights behind me. But as long as it's only in the frame, then that's kind of good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean some environments like big city locations and stuff, you know, the total number of lights in that location could easily exceed like 1,000 or 2,000 lights that we actually end up placing, and then we use as many tricks as we can to kind of keep that number down per frame. Yeah.
Dice que en una ciudad puede haber como 2000 o 1000 y pico luces, fuentes de luz, y que luego tratan de hacer de alguna manera trucar lo máximo posible, hacer algún tipo de truco para poder rebajar las luces por debajo de los 200, o sea, lo máximo posible.
Is something that we want to investigate and explore in the future. So
Yeah.
there was not a no to ray tracing, as I'm seeing some people in chat.
Mira, está hablando una cosa descolando otra vez sobre el ray tracing,
yeah.
que hay
On the
alguna
list.
gente en el chat que está preguntando si tienen ray tracing. Está discolando que no es un no a ray tracing, simplemente que tienen que explorar esa tecnología en el futuro, que van a explorar. No es que sea un no para el ray tracing, que van a explorarla.
Tracing, we have to get the Gen 12 renderer up and running, and that's kind of the main priority, I think, for the graphics team.
Yep. Just like all things in game development, priorities. Fortunately, we can't work on everything all at the same time.
Exactly. I'm trying to find something else to use here.
Antes de pasar a lo que sería ray tracing, comentan que lo primero sería conseguir el motor gráfico en Gen 2, o sea, lo que sería Vulkan. Ok, pasarla a Vulkan o a DirectX 12, pero en principio parece que va a ser Vulkan. Y luego, pues a partir de ahí ya poder pensar en desarrollar el ray tracing en este juego, ¿no?
I'm gonna improvise a little bit.
I'm sure there's some props artist that's like, I've made 300 different light fixtures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if they don't tell us that they made it, then I don't know it exists. Okay. He's looking kind of bright in here. That's a bit of a worry. Let's not use him. Where do we keep the... Oh, this kind of looks like a desk light. Let's use that. But yeah, we certainly have a lot of props in this game. It can be very daunting trying to look through them for something.
Accesorios, movidas, mobiliario, tienen cantidad de cosas. Sí que las tienen, sí.
Put this in here. There we go. I'm just going to create a new light. Put it up here, link it. Is that linked?
Al final esto nos da una idea, ¿no? De lo que hablan muchas veces, de que dicen, bueno, en Star Citizen hay 500 y pico empleados, casi 600 ahora mismo ya. Y la mayoría de ellos, o sea, creo que solo hay 90 desarrolladores y el resto son artistas. Bueno, y aquí yo creo que tenemos un porqué, o sea, realmente tener gente que se dedique a esto solo, esto es muchísimo curro. O sea, es normal que haya tantos artistas en Star Citizen, ¿no?
Let's go with this one.
Y esto pues sería, lo que estamos viendo aquí realmente es una persona trabajando con las herramientas que están haciendo para lo que es el motor del Lumberjack.
And of course,
Pues aquí
it's
vemos,
the
aquí
offset,
vemos un poco
which makes
ese resultado,
my
¿no?
life a little
De
bit
hacer
harder. So
todas
now I
esas
have to
herramientas.
manually kind of drag it into
Y ver
place.
cómo una persona como él, que es un artista, pues puede realmente hacer un montón de cosas, ¿no?
5 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's that there. Let's widen it up. Let's turn on the shadows. Link the light to the actual mesh itself, and then I can like drag them around together and find a decent kind of position for it.
We've had some questions about the aspect ratio you're working in. This looks like what,
Yes.
21:9?
Yeah, something like that. It's an ultra wide Asus Predator.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid. Don't do that.
I'll take my check now, Asus.
Is that just? Is there an advantage for your workflow to work in a ultra wide, or is it just something you like?
Initially, I like when I first got it, it took a little bit of time to kind of get used to having such like a wide screen, because I like having more vertical space as well, like especially when you start having like all these properties to adjust. You can never have enough vertical space. But the more that I've worked with it, definitely it's absolutely awesome for having just like a massive viewport that you can work with. And at the same time, like, the more cinematic you want to get, obviously the wider the screen. And then it just makes it really easy to like get those kind of cinematic angles and wide kind of letterbox moments. So that's good, but definitely what helps more is a second monitor, which is not being shared at the moment, where I've got like, it's just toolbars and other kind of tool windows.
Vale, está
Would be
comentando de
impossible
que
without a second monitor.
bueno, me respondió a la pregunta, ¿no? Sobre el monitor ultra wide, si se mejora su experiencia a la hora de trabajar. Dice que sí, que efectivamente, bueno, dice que tiene un Predator. Además, lo que pasa es que he dicho un Asus Predator, que eso no es un Acer, o sea, tiene un Acer Predator. Y claro, lo que dice es que realmente que sí, que al principio le costó un poco porque cuando está trabajando con props como estos, que tener lo que es el espacio vertical que le ayuda bastante, pero a medida que fue trabajando con él, que cada vez está mucho más a gusto con este tipo de monitor, sobre todo porque si quieres acercarte a una experiencia, cuanto más quieres acercarte a una experiencia cinemática, cuanto más ancho es el monitor mejor, y en este caso pues esta resolución le permite ver ver unas escenas o preparar unas escenas para que sea lo más cinemática posible, ¿no? Con sus fuentes de luz y todo el tema. Y que finalmente lo que más ayuda también es tener un segundo monitor que lo tiene ahora puesto, pero que no lo está compartiendo, donde tiene todas sus herramientas.
Planar / area lights in the engine, they're more expensive than normal lights, so we can't use too many of them. They don't cast area shadows, which is a bit of a limitation. So we try to only use them in areas where it would be really noticeable if the specular highlight wasn't the shape of the light fixture itself. So I'll try and see if it makes sense for this spot here. I'm going to turn off the shadows because you can see you start getting like some really weird artifacts. So let's turn that guy off. That's kind of cool because now the reflection kind of matches up with the light source itself.
Yeah. I spent 30 seconds trying to come up with a joke about the light being plain, and I couldn't do it.
can make it nice and boring, a boring white light.
I'm just off. I'm off today. And chat
Have
wasn't
you had
there
your
to help
coffee
me.
yet?
Chat wasn't there to help me.
All right. So I think by itself, this light's not quite doing it for me. So you can see like what I'm kind of looking for here is, again, always trying to like pick out certain materials, and I'm getting like a little bit of light on the tops of this kind of leather chair, but I just want to add another light a little bit higher up, kind of angled a little bit more down on this guy. That's gonna give me what I want, and I'll try and position it so that I don't see like an extra specular highlight. And in this case, I can add a little bit of shadows as well. Yeah, there we go. So now, if someone was sitting there, they would look pretty cool. Alrighty, what else are we gonna do?
You got about 20 minutes left.
Wow, this is not going as fast. Or maybe it just took a lot longer when I was setting this up initially.
No, it's
okay.
It's one of the realities. Every time we do this, every time we do one of these shows, work does not happen on an hour by hour basis.
No,
there's
exactly.
very few things in game development you can complete in an hour.
Wrap up nice and tidy in an hour. But I can do like maybe one of those cooking shows, and here's one I prepared earlier kind of moments. But I think that maybe that's kind of cool, and then we can spend a bit of time looking at like a nighttime. I'll do some character lighting on this guy here. As I said, he's very untrustworthy of people coming by his little shack, so he's prepared. Got a pistol as well. And the other thing I was proud of this. He stole some of the transit signs from Lorville and brought them back to his place.
I'm gonna get a letter from the environment art team.
Yeah, there's a lot of things here that should not be in the same location. All right, so I'm just going to turn on the stuff that I had done kind of last time, and I'll just run through a little bit of what I was looking at. So again, like kind of finding areas in the location where there's like some interesting props or opportunities to add a little bit of kind of life. So I thought having some like broken lights hanging over.
Claro,
by
dice que
his
por ahí pues
t-shirts would be kinda cool.
hay zonas con las que tienen props interesantes cuando visita las zonas, ¿no? Que ve pues aquí hay props interesantes, poder hacer un efecto de iluminación curioso, como tiene allí la ropa colgada y esa luz parpadeante, ¿no? Que es bueno aprovechar, o sea, es interesante aprovechar ese tipo de recursos.
Way that he's concepted and that's in those games. And it kind of matches the Hurston style. Like we took a lot of the Lorville CBD art style, took a bit of inspiration from those concepts as well. So I thought that kind of matched up with his work desk. He's a little bit lonely, so you got to have some company for your tea party. when you're
tea party.
Taking a few too many substances out in the desert. So yeah, let's have a look out here.
Just a reminder to folks who are submitting questions in the chat. Chris is a lighting artist. If your question is about process in how to light a scene, those are the types of questions that are appropriate for Chris. If your question is gameplay related or even graphics related or engine related and stuff, which we've talked about to some extent, those aren't questions that are appropriate for Chris.
That's my jam.
Yeah, see a lot of really good and really interesting questions. Unfortunately, Chris is not the person for those. In case you're wondering, why are they asking my question?
I'd love to answer it if I knew the answer.
Yeah. Remember, this is an art process stream, so if your question is about
que no le pregunten cosas sobre técnicas de luz porque él es un artista, no es un desarrollador.
Can we shoot out lights or stuff like that, or gameplay related stuff? This is not the stream for that, unfortunately. Wrong, Chris.
One day I'll know enough about everything that I can just do every question that you've got. So what I'm going to do now is, just for the sake of lighting this guy, I'm going to set up a camera that I can use here. And the main reason for that is just that I want to get some nice depth of field and separation on the background here. So I'm going to knock that down, crank up the focus distance a bit. See if I can find where that focal plane is. About right. We're missing some background there, so need a couple million kilometers of rendering distance. And I'm just gonna try and angle this guy a little bit here. So, all right. So actually, it looks like just these lights from the environment already do a pretty decent job. But I'm going to get rid of those lights and kind of do something else, I think. That's on this layer. That looks like it's probably the probe. A bit of some redness from something.
As a follow-up to your
Right.
280 light source question, do VFX and other intermittent light sources like that count against that number?
They would. So if VFX was doing something, I don't know, like for example, like fireflies, and they had light sources that they were giving off, that would all count towards that that limit. What I don't know though is if they were, I don't know if there's a difference between like GPU particles, if they were casting lights versus kind of the light entities that we place, if that kind of runs through a different system or not. But I would guess that they all kind of follow the same.
Bueno, dice que cuando si hay efectos especiales como fuego o
believe
otras cosas, si eso
inappropriate decisions happening.
va a incluirse en el límite de las 208 fuentes de luz. Por esta, y supone que sí,
Right now
que
I'm seeing
depende de,
like
depende
my
si las
cube map is
partículas van
picking up
por
a
otras
lot of red.
fuentes, si es por partículas, si las partículas van por GPU, CPU o si interfiere con el proceso que están haciendo aquí, pero que presupone que sí, que se adaptarán a esas 208 fuentes de luz como máximo, ¿no?
Just because I want as clean a base as possible to light this guy's head.
Chat seems to think this is Clem's twin brother Cletus.
Yeah, exactly. This is Desert Clem. So I'm gonna grab this glow and I'm gonna kill it. There we go. And I'll rebake this guy. That's better. So there's a little bit of light coming from these guys back here, but that'll be fine. I'm just gonna add to it, I think. All right, so when it comes to character lighting, it's I guess it's kind of similar to doing environment lighting, but obviously you've got a single thing to focus on, whereas in the environment you've got different camera angles, different points of interest, that kind of stuff. So for a character, I'll start looking for a key light source, and again, I don't have anything immediately motivating in the scene. I've got these guys back here, so I'll probably use that as a motivated rim light. And I'm just going to do like a basic 3-point lighting setup, which is kind of the most common way to light characters.
Dice que va a hacer un set de 3 puntos de luz y que es la forma más común de iluminar a los personajes en otros focos de luz.
A good kind of brightness value for my key light, and turn it into a projector and shine it at him. Then find where I want it to land. Something like that. Turn on shadows, of course. Get some nice self-shadowing. I'll try and just move it around a little bit and see if I can find something kind of cool. So I mean, like for the real Klim, you know, we had some very dramatic lights because that kind of lent itself to his seedy environment. So I'll do something a little bit similar. I mean, his face just begs for some sinister looking lighting. So
yeah, it cannot be understated how important lighting is, especially for character. It's like when you had it there and it was completely blown out. You know, he just looked kind of weird and off-putting, but now he looks,
Yeah, you can light something really bad really easily.
Están hablando de que puedes hacer que algo parezca siniestro muy fácil con las luces, ¿no? Que son muy
A
importantes
nice
también
kind
para
of
dar esa,
midpoint here. Let's go with
esa
this.
sensación.
And let's find a nice
Como que lo
color.
estaba pidiendo a gritos ese tipo de luz siniestra.
It's always interesting kind of picking a color. Sometimes you got to be careful because the more saturated you get, you can really start making human skin look really sick and dead.
Que dice que tienes que tener cuidado cuando pillas el
What's
color.
Let's go with something like from Mandy. That would be kind of cool.
We've got a little bit of frame rate slowdown here. Is that happening in the engine, or is that just our video chat?
I think it might just be the video. My frame rate's looking pretty good at the moment.
Vale, dice que, bueno, comentando sobre los FPS, los bajos FPS, que en realidad que es del vídeo, que él en su casa lo ve bien. Y aparte está comentando de que tiene que tener cuidado a la hora de darle el color, porque a veces se puede saturar mucho y puede aparecer incluso, especialmente cuando reacciona con la piel humana o darle ese toque a la piel humana, que puede parecer incluso que la piel está muerta o demás, que hay que tener cuidado, ¿no? Cuando se le da ese color.
I'm going to use a color. I'm going to use an actual light temperature because we can basically pick with our lights if we want to use like a gel, which would just be any kind of saturated RGB color. Obviously, you can
Dice
find
que
the right
además,
colors in
para
there,
el
but
otro
it's a
lado que
bit
está
more difficult.
haciendo, está decidiendo pillar la calidez del color, la temperatura del color, o sea, la temperatura de la luz, que pueden escoger tanto lo que es cualquier gama de colores RGB o también la temperatura de la luz, pueden hacerlo por diferentes sistemas. Ahí vemos la que le dan el cogote a la parte derecha, ¿no? Que es de temperatura.
So that's the rim light portion. We'll just keep it there for time's sake, and then just add a fill. And again, like with those ratios, it's so easy to just completely nuke it with the fill light being too bright. So let's bring that guy down. And maybe, let's see, maybe this is like a slightly bluer. I always like playing with some really extreme lighting colors. Maybe this is like from the sky actually. So let's jump out instead of coming from the bottom. I'm gonna bring this fill up, kind of bring it out from the side or from the top. Yeah, that's kind of cool. There you go. So we get some nice like subsurface scattering in his ears from the rim light. Not loving my my brake lights key light here. So let's try and find something else. Let's just go with something kind of sickly warm. I mean, and as with kind of everything in lighting, is like you're never really done. You just kind of stop at some point when it looks good.
That is true of every
all,
art
all artistic.
Dice que cuando haces luces que tienes que parar en algún momento cuando empieza a parecer bien, porque si no, no pararías nunca. Y dice que es algo que parece, es algo común en las artes, dice Discolando, ¿no? Que nunca hay, siempre hay un retoque o algo que se puede hacer.
You can tweak this stuff forever. So now what I'm looking for is, if I turn this off and just go back into my camera, his eyes are looking very flat and dead, and that's just because the placement of my lights just means that I'm not getting a specular highlight catching in his eyes, which is very common in CG or computer graphics. So I'm just going to add a specific catch light.
Vale, dice que ahora mismo no está consiguiendo luz en los globos oculares o en lo que es la mirada y que quiere tratar de conseguir un efecto, ¿no? Y que es lo que está haciendo ahora. Que es algo muy común en CGI, el tipo de que no se consiga eso, ¿no? Que hay que hacer otra cosa. Cuando están trabajando, me refiero.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
Now, as we demonstrated before, you're setting your lights now and getting the lights you want, and then you'll find fixtures
Fijaros
to
lo que le
Yeah,
lleva.
exactly.
justify
I
the
mean,
place. Yeah.
in this,
Fijaros lo que le lleva la diferencia de iluminar un personaje con la diferencia de iluminar una estancia, telita, ¿eh? O sea, la estancia la hizo así, venga, pim pam pum, y el personaje le está llevando tela.
what we try and do is make our characters look as good as possible all the time. But you know, the difference between a movie and a game, the primary difference obviously, is that you can move around, you can come at a character from any angle, and therefore the artist doesn't really have any true control over how the character looks. In a movie, you know, everything is set up very, very specifically in every single shot, and lights don't generally make sense. Like they're just kind of placed in space, around, reflected, that kind of stuff. For lighting a game, like if this was a game character that we were doing.
Bueno, está comentando un poco la diferencia que hay entre hacer una música para entre una película y un videojuego. O sea, perdón, la luz entre una película y un videojuego, que al final es lo mismo que la música. Es lo mismo que nos habían comentado en su momento, que tú tienes una escena prehecha, predefinida. En un juego no puedes andar alrededor de todos los sitios, las situaciones cambian, varían, son dinámicas. Entonces, la forma de trabajar es totalmente distinta. Tienes que tener en cuenta otro tipo de cosas, más que el hacer pues una escena perfecta, como si fuese una escena en una peli, ¿no?
Off of his thing here, and then I'll try and see if I can make something like that work. Like this kind of gives him a little bit mysterious, kind of don't want to mess with him vibe. And then again, luckily because it's a sci-fi game, we can justify having lights in places where most people wouldn't actually put lights. So if I put a light on the
Además,
floor,
dice además que debido a que es un juego de ciencia ficción, puede justificar el hecho de poner luces en sitios donde normalmente no habría para tratar de arreglar la imagen.
now if this was like kind of game lighting or like in-game lighting, it would be a little bit closer to something like this, and then we can kind of tweak things a little bit more. We just have a little bit less of that really fine control, like specifically with putting in an eye catch light, like for the specular highlights on his eyes. That's a lot harder to motivate in an actual level design kind of sense of lighting.
Cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool there. So, yep. Where'd that light go? I had a light in here. Oh well, it's lost to the ages. Got that. And I think finally we'll just pull the sun up and let Cletus Klim bask in the morning glow of another day.
Dice que ya acabamos y que dejaremos a Klim disfrutar
There we go.
del brillo de la mañana otro día,
Very
¿no?
cool. Well, thank you so much, Chris,
Yeah, anytime.
taking us through a bit of your process. I mean, obviously, you know, every time we do one of these shows, whether it's lighting or props or weapons or characters or whatever, you can't fit the entire process in the space of an hour.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more that I could do. So many different angles that you can approach this stuff from. So,
but we do appreciate the scratching the surface, if you will, taking us through this.
Exactly.
You can go ahead and stop the screen share. That's it for the show this week, guys. As we like to do here, we are going to throw the raid to a Star Citizen streamer who is streaming right now. My understanding is that it is HC Vertigo, who I haven't seen in quite some time.
Bueno, pues como siempre van a pasarle viewers a
He's a pretty good
a
streamer.
un streamer
I
y
think
tal,
he's
y
mining
bueno, ya se acabó el show.
right now. So if you want to join in the raid, you can hit the little button at the top of the chat and you can join the
Si
raid.
dice algo más.
And when you get there, everybody scream, "Turn the lights on!" He'll have absolutely no idea what's going on. For Star Citizen Live, I'm Jared. That's Chris. Join us next week for a very special Ship Showdown live. It's going to be different. Until then, we'll see you then. Take care. Be safe. And keep on trucking. I don't know. See you, everybody.
Thanks, Jared. Bye.
Bueno, y pues sí, parece que vamos a tener un Ship Showdown interesante la semana que viene, que estemos atentos, que lo van a hacer algo diferente. Pues eso dicen, ¿no? Y nada, con la misma nos vamos a jugar al Star Citizen, así que corto aquí, chavales, para que se quede ya hecho para el YouTube y todo eso. Y nos vemos ahora.